Okay, it says we're live since I've never done this before. I'm just still learning how this works. I think we're live. So hello everyone, welcome. This is the first time I'm doing something live. I admit I am a little bit nervous, but I do appreciate everyone who is here, everyone who is watching. And you might have seen that I dropped it in the chat box. It's also in the video description where you can submit your questions. I will try and keep an eye on the chat, but that's where I'll be getting some of the questions. Some people submitted questions before the time. So I think we should just dive in. And I don't know exactly how long or how many questions we'll get through. I'll do my best to just give good answers and get through as many questions as possible. So here we go. The first question. How to identify your core blocks on the journey? So I think this is actually a really good question, and I think there's many ways that I could answer this. Thanks. Hello. Thanks for the hellos too. I think there are many ways that this could actually be answered, but I think it might also be useful to just give my definition or my understanding of what a core block is, because I think maybe some people might be like, well, what is that? And why is that important to know? Hello, everyone. I don't know if I'm going to just have to say hello back, so please do know that I'm saying hello back to everyone here. So what is a block exactly? If you look at a block, you can identify it sometimes using your feelings. Like you can feel there's like a heaviness or an energetic feeling, like a blockage, like within yourself. If you're very sensitive to yourself and your body or your own chakras, for example, you can feel like there's something that is preventing the flow of love. So that's what we would call a block or a blockage. Somewhere that love is meant to flow in your body or in your reality, in your life. And blocks can also manifest as physical things in your life. Like that's also the key. So a core block is something that, there's different ways to look at it. A core block could be something that is at the core, in a sense of your own sense of self, the essence of who you are. But it's also core in the sense that it might manifest in many places in your life. That's typically also how you can identify something. It's not just, oh, surface level things. It's like it's popping up here, but it's also popping up here. And so you might be pulling out, this, you might be healing something in this area and healing something in this area. But if you look at it like a root of a plant, if it's like the main root and you haven't actually resolved that main root, some shoots of it might still come out, right? So you might be like weed whacking on the surface over here, but at the core, there's still something very deep that hasn't been looked at or hasn't been resolved. So how to identify core blocks? Well, maybe this idea of like, if you feel that something is cropping up in seemingly unrelated places in your life, it could be pointing to a core block. Another way to look at it, thank you for the questions in the chat. I will also try to get to those. I'll try and balance it out. But just so you know, there is a place where you can go and like submit questions, just so you know. So another way to also look at identifying core blocks is if you ask yourself not just the surface level question of why I'm upset about something. Say you're experiencing a trigger, like your twin flame is triggering something. Don't just stop at that, like, okay, my twin flame's not communicating to me and I'm upset, and that's like the first step, right? There's healing happens in layers, and what you want to do is continue to go deeper and deeper. And you can even in my tech career, we use something from before. We use something called the 5 whys to get to the root cause of something. So don't just stop at the first question of why I'm upset. Well, ask yourself, okay, what about this is upsetting to me? And then continue to go deeper until you get to something that will feel like, yeah, this is really something. And typically things like core blocks can be like, I'm not good enough. That for me, for example, is one of my core blocks that I continue to work on and heal around, is I'm not good enough. And so on the surface, it might look like many different things manifesting, many different upsets, many different triggers. But if I follow it down to the root, I can feel like, it often comes down to that. And so you'll begin to see these themes manifesting in many different ways. And so that is what I would call a core block. And you can use some of these techniques that I've talked about. Actually, many healing techniques or recovery tools will also show you how to get to the root of something, not just to kind of slap a band-aid on it, but really look at like what is really happening at the essence of who I am. And this does take work. It does take work to get to know yourself. It takes work to learn to be sensitive to yourself, to listen to your intuition and your inner knowing, to begin to discern, okay, well, I can feel something here. And you'll begin to recognize that feeling of when something is core, because when you resolve it at the core, you'll see that it has a ripple effect out over your life. Whereas if you heal something like some surface level things, it's not a bad thing, right? You might just be getting used to what is healing, how do I heal? And then, once you get to the root of it and resolve it, you'll recognize like there's a big shift taking place, and you'll feel like this energetic release and relief, and you'll feel lighter. And yeah, it's like you just picked out a heavy rock out of a backpack that you were carrying, and now put the backpack on again, and it feels a lot lighter. And for me, what's really important when it comes to healing or even core blocks or blocks in general is to see that there's always a gift there. So it's not to avoid it, it's not to run away from it, it's to embrace it, to see that, okay, actually there is something here for me. I get to know more about myself. I get to love myself. I have expanded awareness about who I am. I get to discover exactly what gift I have to give. And there's always a gift in healing, especially when we heal the core blocks. So thank you for that question. I hope I did it justice. I hope I didn't take long for all of these questions, but I'm marking this one as answered. And I'm going to quickly check out the chat because I can see quite a couple of questions there. So maybe we can knock out some chat questions quickly. How do I surrender as the twin chaser? Hi, Sasha. Thank you for your question. I want to be able to surrender and move on to my own self-healing and then get to the reunion stage. Alrighty. I think we'll probably get a couple of chaser questions. So my first recommendation, and this is me personally, I don't like to get too attached to a label or identify too much and like, I'm the chaser or I'm the runner or my twin's the chaser or they're the runner. I think that it's okay to call out the pattern and say, okay, I'm moving through a pattern of chasing. Maybe that's not quite your question, but I do think learning to detach from a label like I am the chaser does also help you not to be too identified with it, which will actually also help you to surrender and just be like, okay, so surrender to the fact that maybe you are moving through and healing and releasing the chaser pattern. So your question is, how do I surrender as the twin chaser? What you really want to do is embrace maybe you are healing this pattern right now. Embrace yourself in that and accept that this is what you're moving through. And that actually allows you to actually release it because you are not the pattern that you are releasing. And you are on your own self-healing journey if you're asking this question. So learning to focus on yourself here is also going to come as a result of that, I feel. I hope I did that justice. You can always ask more questions in the chat if you want to clarify. So the next question we have is 5-element healing. I can feel my DM, that's divine masculine for people who might not know, every moment, but he's very, very silent. My question is that where I have to heal in me. Okay, so my advice actually here is this, of course, you might know if you've done some twin flame research, which most of you probably have. If you look at the twin flame dynamic, you'll go, well, my twin is mirroring something to me. And there is truth in that. They are going to reflect things to you to heal. But the question here is like, okay, he's silent or he's doing this. What am I supposed to heal? And it's kind of making your healing dependent on them and what they're doing and their behavior and how they're acting or what they're not doing. My advice or my recommendation would be to work toward shifting to focusing on yourself. Yes, it is information that you see coming back to you. I'm not saying ignore them. I'm not saying don't respond to them. But to help you here, 5-element healing, you can ask yourself, well, how do I feel about this situation? How do I feel that this is happening? And that is your key to unlocking the step for what is actually here for you to heal and what is the lesson in love that your twin is bringing you in this particular situation. Okay. The abundant mystic goddess asked, can we reunite with our twin without Kundalini ascension? I think that's what the question was. I'll be honest, I don't know what Kundalini ascension is in terms of what somebody might say it is. I do know about Kundalini awakening, and also if you've studied, I think it is from the Vedic, sort of the Hindu branch of spirituality. So Kundalini is like there's a coil of energy at the base of your spine, and so often people on the spiritual journey, especially on their twin flame journey, will experience what they call a Kundalini awakening. So that energy moving at the base of your spine, that coil of energy moving through. I don't know about something called Kundalini ascension. I do want to caution people not to be too, that's my personal view on this, is not to be too attached to, Kundalini awakenings and these kinds of, like, I'm not saying it's wrong or bad. You are going to experience these spiritual events, most likely. It's a spiritual journey. There are going to be these spiritual things. But I do sometimes think we can lose groundedness when we get too attached to that, and like lose being down to earth. And I do think there is a beautiful, profound spirituality just found in the everyday. And I know that sounds weird, but for me, the everyday can also be truly sacred. So to your question, do we need to like have a Kundalini ascension? Yeah, you can. It's not, there's nothing like that that's really required for reuniting with your twin flame. There's not like this massive checklist. Oh, I need my Kundalini to be awakened. I need to, yeah. And our journeys are all unique. I'm going to pop back into the previously submitted questions just because people obviously took the time to submit them. So this one is, what are the few common blocks related to communication on the journey? Twin flame communication is a very common thing that I think people work through and challenges that they have around. And so some of the common blocks that I would say is, well, firstly, I think many times we might not be clear about our intention for communicating, or what we're trying to communicate, or are we trying to get something from our twin flame through communicating? And if so, like, what are we trying to get? And I think sometimes we'll be like, no, I've released expectations, but maybe we're actually avoiding the fact that we do have expectations, which is also okay. It's okay to sometimes have expectations about things and about life. But I would say, so yeah, expectations is probably a common block. And I think also coming from an energy of trying to get something or use communication with your twin flame to validate your healing, I would say that in itself is also a block. Another thing to know is that communication with your twin flame does happen on many levels, not just with your twin flame, but especially there. But because, we are spiritual beings, and yes, we do communicate verbally, but there's other cues that we have to pick up on. And so especially if you're perhaps in a situation where your twin flame has blocked you, or maybe you're not actually communicating verbally or face to face, or it might just be text communication. There's all these kinds of layers of abstraction in a way. So we are a little bit cut off from what we're used to in terms of communicating with somebody in front of us. But know that with your twin flame, it's not necessary. It cannot prevent the fact that there is communication going on. And what I mean by that is, obviously, if you're not actually texting, you go, well, we're not actually communicating. But there are levels of communication, and you are communicating with them, at least in my experience and my belief, on a soul level. And some people call this twin flame telepathy. I think that is one form of that communication. So I also think actually being too attached to twin flame telepathy is another block, and maybe I won't dive into that. Another block I would say is just fear of being honest, because even here I'm sitting and I'm communicating honestly, and I'm scared. It's uncomfortable. I'm nervous, right? But sometimes we got to embrace the fact that we're uncomfortable, because there's a lot of growth there. If we just want to stay in our comfort zone, we're just going to shrink our comfort zone. Right? But if we're actually willing, in a compassionate way, not in a way that pushes us beyond what is good for us or what feels right to us, what we can actually, continue to do or maintain, it's like we got to make sure that we're able to do this in a way that is loving and kind, but we still got to be willing to step outside of that comfort zone and face the discomfort and even embrace it. So sometimes you're going to be willing to have uncomfortable conversations with your twin flame. Another thing, that said, And I think this will be the final common block with communication, because I do encourage you, if you feel so guided, to share your truth. And yes, express your truth. Express your truth with love. But that doesn't mean dump all your feelings on them and be like, well, I expressed my truth and that is beautiful and loving. Well, not necessarily. So I think there were a couple of things I said in there. Okay, I'm going to pop back to the chat and let's see what some other questions are, because I have a feeling I'm quite at the top of the chat. So, can twin flame... no, it jumped to the bottom and I lost my place. Okay, Ileana Ortiz asked, can twin flames be very different? Good question. And what I will say is, yes, they can be very different in the sense of you are each your unique person and you will have oneness, right? You will have oneness at your core and they are your complement. Now, complement doesn't mean you're going to be clones of each other. And I do sometimes say this in my videos because people think the mirroring is like, I lift my hand, they lift their hand. It's not quite like that. And I think there is beauty to be found in embracing where you feel you're different, but perhaps it's not so much different in the true sense as like, well, they might be challenging growth in that area. They might be challenging your idea of what a perfect person for you would look like, or how, love looks like to you. And I think that this kind of question is understandable. I think that this is sometimes how we evaluate soulmate relationships, and we're like, okay, we're compatible in these ways. Well, twin flames will function a little bit differently. It's not to say that they're incompatible. I don't believe that. I hope you all know that, but in case you don't, it's out there. Twin flames are truly compatible because there's that complementary nature and the fact that it's unconditional love that binds you. And so, does it matter if you're different? See what the gift is there. See what the lesson in love is. Diversity is a beautiful thing. And I'm not saying being different for the sake of being different either. Alrighty. Natalie Lafontaine says, hi from Quebec. Hello. Hello from Norway. We got some more hellos, and we got, thank you, Val. That's really beautiful. So we've got some people saying they're runners. Katricia asked, could it take a lifetime to heal your twins passing away? I fear that may always be there. Well, firstly, I'm very sorry for your loss. Personally, I do believe that this is a compassionate journey and that this is a compassionate universe too. And so we don't always understand the twists and turns that the journey takes as we're like in the process of facing a big challenge or facing something incredibly hurtful or painful like that. And so I would say that wondering whether it would take a lifetime, it's not really how long it takes. And I think sometimes we could put a lot of pressure on ourselves to heal something very fast. It's actually simply accepting, well, this is just where I am right now. And if this is where I am, there's a reason that I'm facing this right now. And my acceptance of where I am right now, instead of saying I should be somewhere else, or I should be facing somewhere else, or it should take this long, or is it going to take this long, actually just means we're not being present or accepting, unconditionally accepting of ourselves in this space. And so I don't know how long it's going to take to heal any one thing or any other thing. And I would just say, I would just encourage you to just have bucket loads of compassion for yourself and just do your best to accept yourself where you are right now, and just trust that, well, sometimes the healing, when we're in the midst of it, it might seem like nothing is shifting or nothing is budging, and we can get really tired. We can get really like worn down and fatigued, But then if we take a step back, and maybe even shift our focus. I'm not saying avoid, I'm not saying run away, but just shift our focus and get perspective again. We can actually have a real, true kind of bird's eye view of the journey that we're on, and we can actually see the healing in a wholly different light. I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah. I think that might actually be something to go into a little bit more. I'm not sure that this kind of a setting is the best place to address something like that, because I think there is a lot more depth there. Okay, I see somebody else answered. Mukul answered about Acceptance too. Okay. Well, there's consensus. Ravika asked, why do I dream almost every night about him? It started when we broke up and it continues still. Well, a lot of people would be very grateful to have twin flame dreams. Some people wish them and say that they can't have them, but understand we each have our own challenges. So it seems that, well, I would ask yourself, well, what are these dreams teaching me? Because dreams are very healing. Dreams are a way also for us to process and heal in a way where we're more surrendered and not necessarily as controlling, because we have access to some, sort of shadow or unconscious parts of ourselves that maybe we don't want to look at, some sort of blind spots that can often come out in dreams. And so you have access to a whole host of information. And so your dreams are a way to connect with your twin and to also receive the next steps, to see different aspects of yourself for healing. You can see progress, you can process in this way. So, yeah, the dreams are there to share a message with you. They're there to help you on your path and journey. All right, before I carry on with the chat questions, I want to hop back into the pre-submitted questions. So the next question we have is, go into detail. Once both twin flames know who they are, did all the work, and live unconditional love. So everyone did all the work. The work continues though, but okay, that's not the whole question. Raise the Kundalini. Here it is again. We got some Kundalini. Then meet to accomplish a spiritual mission. Okay, that wasn't really a question, but I guess somebody's asking me to explain the journey in detail. Okay, so well, I mean, one of the things is kind of what I already said. It's like the work continues. It depends also how you define the work. Like, I guess what they mean here is healing and healing into reunion. Then meet to accomplish a spiritual mission. Well, you don't need to wait for your twin flame to start what you called here spiritual mission. You can actually be on your mission and be doing mission work, be working on your mission now. And also, continue to do that even after you've reunited. So, I mean, I don't know that this is necessarily a good question to cover in a live Q&A to kind of dissect all the steps of the journey. I also think this is put in a very linear fashion. Also, I said before, I don't personally think you have to raise your Kundalini, although what I think they're also talking about here is like raise your, what many new agey people would say, raise your vibration or raise the frequency of your vibration. And what that really means is work on, healing within yourself and coming into the consciousness and coming into the frequency of your union and so on. So that is also something you can do now and continue to do and will continue to do even after you reunite with your twin flame, because this is basically the ascension journey. So, I mean, I hope I went into a little bit of detail there. I'm not really sure exactly how much detail to cover here. Okay, back to the chat. We'll come back to these other questions. They're hard. Okay. Wait, question. I'm looking for question marks. Okay, there we go. Okay, so Katricia, I know that this is kind of the next step to your question, and I do think that I kind of addressed to the best of what I think is appropriate for this kind of setting. But yeah, so, oh no, it jumped again. Too many questions. Oh goodness. I might not get to all the questions. So if you do feel that one of your questions was skipped over and you would like it asked, you can also drop it in the link at this place that I linked. It's difficult to keep track of everything. Okay, Natalie says, I did not understand this connection. I said we have the same grain, not knowing it was the same soul. How can this be possible? It's weirdly mystical and incomprehensible. I do think it's beautiful. And I mean, here, this is once again kind of pointing to the side, something I said earlier, which is not being too attached to the labels. Like, you don't have to say, oh, same soul, same grain. It's like you're pointing to the truth of oneness. And so the language we use to communicate, it is important. I'm not saying words are not important, but it's more important that you're tuned into the energy of that truth. right? And so that's what you were communicating. And so how can this be possible? Well, because what is truly true, it's not that you make it true, it's true and you feel that truth because it resonates with all your soul, right? It resonates with all that you are. And we can run from that, we can avoid that, we can say, oh, no, no, that's not it. But what's true is true. So, and Mukul is giving some beautiful more advice to Katricia. So I appreciate also the people piping up and adding in here. That's very useful. And I do agree. It's like not being too focused on, you know, well, what they said is 3D is an illusion. I do also think that it is important to be present in our reality. Excuse me. Um, and not to see like the 5D or other cosmic dimensions as an escape from the present reality, because there's a reason that we're here having this experience. It's here to teach us something, not to get too caught up in it, but not to kind of numb out and escape to the 5D. I think that is a challenge I also go through sometimes. Okay. Fuchsia asked, what are the common challenges faced at the beginning of a twin flame reunion? So I guess this is when you and your twin flame reunite. That's a great question. I mean, it's really going to depend because everyone's journey is quite unique. And I think what can often happen is you're kind of coming into the space of, especially if you were like, maybe you were healing for a long time, you had an idea of how things were going to be and you visualized it and now it's manifested. And so I think there's sometimes this kind of shedding of the fantasy. And maybe this is kind of pointing to that 5D cosmic thing, shedding of the fantasy of it and just embracing things as they are in the down to earth sense, and also trusting, well, it is a process. It is a process of getting to know each other. It's a process of just really having patience with each other. And as you're going through all of this, as you are working to live your lives together, and you're in the process of settling into your union and all of these things, some things are still going to come up. Maybe even things that you thought you'd healed, they might come up again. And you're like, oh my goodness. And so it might feel very overwhelming. And so I think sometimes thinking that, or even having a fear, perhaps this person's going to run, or maybe you're going to lose them, or maybe go through separation again. I think that's quite a common challenge. And so just having a lot of compassion, a lot of patience, and actually just giving each other the space to process and to come into this, and not trying to make things happen or push things forward, and continue doing what you were doing up until that point, right? In the sense of like, if there were certain things that you had, certain practices or routines, or maybe you did spiritual work, or maybe you had, a community to support you. It's like, don't walk away from those things and like, oh, well, I have my reunion now. Well, those things were there to support you. So those pillars of support are still there for you, right? Okay. Okay, so I would still recommend 5 element healing, that you focus on, focus on what you feel is missing then. If you feel something's missing, look at that. That might be something where you feel something is lacking or missing. Um, there's a couple more comments. I would love to read all these in depth, but I'm trying to find the questions. Oh no, it jumped to the bottom again, I think. Am I meant to be with my twin? Well, I do believe that. I do believe that. That's this from Janice. I do believe that you are listening to this and that there's a purpose and a reason to this. I don't believe in a nonsensical kind of journey or reality that you would come to all of this knowing and be guided to work through all of these things only to be met at the other end with that not. And that's not about like, oh yeah, you get to be with your twin, like, it's like some prize or a trophy, but it's like there is a purpose to this. There's a reason that you're here. There's a reason that we're guided to the journey. And for me, that does mean being with my twin. That is something that's like a conviction. And for that translates into you being with your twin. Aman asked, hey, can I ask a long question? Yes. Of course, I'm using my discretion to, yeah, anyway, yes. Okay, Nyok. I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly, sorry. Any advice on how to deal with DMs going through puberty? Not funny. Not funny. Okay. I only laughed because you said not funny. Sorry. A DM on steroids, lol, lol. Okay. Any advice on how to do? Well, I guess going through puberty, there's kind of this idea of also that maturation process, as in somebody maturing. And we'll probably be going through. I don't know if this is a serious question because there's a lol at the end. So I'm just going to be very mature in answering it and saying it sounds like it's about maturity. So, in a process of maturing, you got to be very patient and have a lot of boundaries and just be firm with what those boundaries are. And boundaries are not walls, boundaries are not to control anyone. Boundaries are a statement of this is how I choose to treat myself and this is how I choose to be treated. And I'm firm and consistent with that. I don't really know how else to answer that question. It's a bit strange. So, I'm popping back into the pre submitted questions. Guys, we made it 31 minutes. That's impressive. Woo! The choo-choo train continues. Okay, next question. What is the feeling of meeting your TF for the first time? Is it as magical as most YouTubers describe it? Well, I don't know what most YouTubers say exactly. It is magical for me because it was magical for me, but I don't believe it's magical in the fantasy kind of sense. And let me kind of try and explain a little bit, because as a kid, I was like super into Harry Potter, maybe still a little bit Potter fan. So I would have these fantasies of, I'm going to go to Hogwarts. And, that's kind of the magical fantasy that is not twin flames. That is kind of what some people and what I even used to think twin flames are. But there is a magic to it, but it's a different kind of magic. It's like this profound and sacred knowing of things falling into place, and you just really see like, oh, things just make sense now, and make sense in a beautiful and profound way. And that doesn't mean that at some other points you're going to feel confused and not have clarity, but in that moment things just kind of shift into place in a way where it's like, wow, I couldn't make this up. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't contrive this, I couldn't fabricate this. And so the feeling was very peaceful and at home and very normal on the one hand, but also seeing how the pieces were fitting together, it was like there's a passion and a thrill and an aliveness to it. And it just feels divine in that way. I hope that satisfies as an answer. Okay, let us continue. Wait, I have to mark it as completed. Yes. I'm going to do one more just because I had to log into my phone. And so, okay. What is the difference between a soulmate kiss and twin flame kiss? Okay. I guess people are quite like focused on the physical thingies. It's okay. We're allowed to. It's beautiful. Physical is part of our human experience. I mean, I do think we can also, this is continuing on in this, like taking away the fantasy glamour, because sometimes it's just going to feel like you're humans, a normal kiss, right? But it's also really, really beautiful because it just feels incredibly safe. You feel like I feel incredibly held and safe, and kind of, it doesn't have that, what I used to think was like, oh, the one, which is this thrill and this excitement and like electric shock and all of that. I didn't have that. And I'm quite grateful that I didn't. It wasn't like that, but it was just beautiful and warm and like peaceful. And yeah, just, I get it. It's just a little bit private too, Anyway, okay, I feel I answered that. I hope I did. Next question. I'm gonna blush on camera. That's embarrassing. Oh no, did it jump to the bottom? Okay, so Xenia says my TF doesn't love me romantically. Because we are two women and she is hetero, I feel the love so strong. She loves me, but not like a partner. Any advice? Well, Xenia, I would say that the important thing here is to trust yourself. If you really do feel that this is your twin flame, trust that and trust yourself. It's not that you have to convince her. You don't have to. You let her know your truth. You let her, if you have communicated that, you can just be you and trust that the love will continue to grow and will be revealed to her too. Our twin flames also go through their own process of coming to oh, this is my person. It's not necessarily going to look exactly like ours. I do feel with twin flames there's a parallelism to it. But that doesn't mean, like we said, they're not clones, right? So they're not necessarily going to look like exactly the same thing that you're going through. So even if she's saying right now she's hetero, maybe that's because she's used to that. So love her unconditionally there, right? Love her unconditionally and continue to work on whatever it brings up in you. Um, and if she does feel the love, eventually it will be revealed. And maybe that is something that she will be open to seeing, but you don't have to make her see it. So as you just love her in whatever way there is an opening right now, just love her unconditionally there and give her the space to come into that knowing. If and like that's really the most loving thing and kind thing to do, is to be patient with our twin flames and just allow them to come to the truth that if I've arrived at this truth, allow them to come to this truth. Even if I think I know, well, I knew it first. Well, that's silly. There's no one-upping your twin flame. You're like one. What the heck? Not saying that that is the energy that you're coming from, Xenia. I don't get that sense at all. So I would say continue to look at whatever lesson this is bringing for you. But yeah, have a lot of patience with yourself too. And I know that this kind of a challenge is very hard. It can seem impossible. So whatever the challenge is, accept that this is the challenge, but that there's a gift here for you. We have a couple of other same-sex unions in the chat. Cool. Welcomes. We are welcoming. Okay. Cool. Message retracted. Okay. Dragos asked, when both twin flames are men, is it normal for the ego to play a big part? I feel like for him it's very hard to come to terms with this because he is very independent, goal-oriented person. Oh, he is a very... Well, I don't think, honestly, that men or women men are more likely to be in, triggered or coming from a place of ego rather than women. I think that both could be coming from that or facing challenges around, well, there's different terminology. Like some say killing the ego. I don't see it like that. When both twin flames are, so it depends really. But I would say it's like, don't focus so much on the ego part. Focus on the love. So it's very hard for him to come to terms with this because he's very independent. And see, perhaps there is an independent, goal-oriented part of you that maybe he's awakening in you. And as you learn to embrace that, as you learn to love that and see that as a beautiful thing, or if this is a complementary aspect, as in you perhaps have some codependency stuff to work through, that's okay. See what this brings up in you and meet it with love. The thing here that is, the ego is not important. It's the love that's important. Gay, not gas. Okay. Gas? I don't see gas. I must have misread. And I'm sorry if I missed your question. Like, you can add it in the link. I'm trying to do my best to get through all of them. Did it drop? Thank you to all the comments. Should I wait? What? Oh, there we go. Okay, Scorpio, Leo Moon asks, should I delete my twin flame contact since we're on separation? Well, I mean, why would you delete them, even if you are in separation? Like, well, it's not so much about should I do this or should I do that or how should I behave. I think a lot of people want like a twin flame rule book, like play by play, act this and then do this and then don't text them or do text them and text them this and then don't do that. But that's really not what the journey is about. But I mean, I'm not making fun of you. I just think it's really important to ask yourself, well, where is this question coming from? And does it really make sense for me to delete them? Maybe it does for you for whatever reason, but understand why you'd want to delete them, right? Like, and that's okay. I mean, I don't like do prescriptive twin flame stuff like don't text them or don't reach out or do reach out. Like, really, it is for us to just learn to trust ourselves and our inner guidance. But I mean, I don't see why you would anyway. It's okay that you feel that way, though. Maybe you're like, well, maybe I should because I should be focused on myself, right? But focusing on yourself doesn't mean pushing your twin flame away. Just to let you know. Okay. Oh, good. Fuchsia, you ask a great question here. How do you overcome the fear of them being with someone else? We're both single right now, but he says that he just wants to be friends. Should I give up on the possibility of romance? Well, I don't think you should give up on your dreams. That's what I would say. Um, well, the only way to overcome fear, firstly, you did the first step is to name it. You acknowledged, well, I am afraid of that. And then to face that and ask yourself, well, okay, what if they are with someone else? Does that change how I feel? Does them being with someone else justify me walking away from what I feel is my person? Yes or no? Right? I can't decide for you. I'd love to motivate everyone, but I cannot. I mean, I do my best, but it doesn't matter whether, whether one person tells you to do this or that. It really comes down to you tuning into this and saying, well, this is what I would choose for my life. This is what I choose. I choose love, and I choose to let love guide me and lead me on. And I choose to let love be the voice that shows me, or not just the voice, but I choose to let love be the force in my life for all things. And so love is how you overcome. You love yourself there and say, okay, I'm scared. It's okay to be scared. It's a scary thing to imagine the person that you love being with somebody else. But only you can be the right person for your twin flame. That's what I personally believe, that you are the right fit for them. And it's not about you trying to convince them or compete with somebody else. I do have videos on this particular topic, but which you might want to go check out. But I do think this is a great question. So it's okay to be afraid of that. Like, it just means that you're afraid of losing love. And we all have that fear, I would say. On some level, it manifests maybe a little bit differently. So the only way is to face that fear, to realize that we can't lose love. Thank you to all the supportive comments too. Appreciate that. Okay, I think this is like somebody sharing their story in the chat, which is cool. Not necessarily a question. Mm. Hmm. Juhi asked, does it happen to you too that sometimes doing inner work you feel kind of spiritual dryness and you simply have to push it? How do you deal with it? Hmm. That's a great question. I mean, spiritual dryness, it's like there's no fuel for it in a way. It's like maybe you don't feel driven to do it, maybe you don't feel like doing it. I don't think we need to be draconian with our inner work. I do think having a routine and a regimen, in a way that you would have a morning routine, right? That is a great way to see consistent progress. But I also know that healing has its seasons and its cycles, and so I might go through some intense healing for a period, like where I'm sitting and doing a lot of work on myself or in my relationships or so on. And then other moments where it's like I'm taking not a break from the healing, but giving it space to integrate. It's like, and I like to draw on like analogies from nature. It's like if you're tending an inner garden, and like some aspect of inner work is like, well, you're clearing the garden, you're weeding it, you're planting seeds, you're watering it, but sometimes you're also just like giving the plants room to grow. And in that sense, the inner work that you get doing, you also want to give it space to root, because it's quite deep, the inner work. So you got to also find a pace that is consistent. And so pushing it, no. If you're coming from an energy of force, I would say that's usually a sign you don't need to do it. Like, don't force yourself to do something. And it's also learning that discernment of what the right pace is for you, but you can also learn to be inspired in doing inner work. It doesn't mean you always feel like it, right? This is where learning that discipline comes in, especially if you're noticing, well, I'm avoiding something and it keeps coming up. Well, that's the time to actually address it, right? Okay. I'm gonna pop into a question in here in the chat. Okay, my not the chat, I mean the pre-submitted questions. My twin flame is still unhappily married and he feels he's stuck in it. We've been in contact for a while now and have seen each other, but do I need to cut off the contact just for him to be able to move? I mean, I understand that this can be a difficult situation, but I do feel asking it in this way does sound a little bit controlling, as in, well, should I stop talking to him just so he'll get the heck out of there? And But I also understand, like, if you feel that on some level you communicating in this way is enabling him to just kind of settle in and he's not going to make a move, I can understand why you might ask yourself that. But then it comes down to a question of you having boundaries and you valuing yourself and communicating that, not necessarily like, well, I'll cut off contact hoping that that sparks something or catalyzes this person to move, because that's more controlling, and control never goes the way you hoped. It never doesn't work. So, well, at least that's how I'm reading it. And maybe that's not what you mean, whoever submitted this question. But my encouragement would be, well, really tune in to see, well, what is it that you're upset about? Okay, they're not doing something about it. Well, learn to be patient. But also communicate how you feel and communicate that it's okay to have boundaries there. You don't have to enable and just give and give and give and give and give. Oh, this is my twin flame. Let me just give and give and give and give. Well, maybe you actually feel a little bit drained there. Maybe you feel drained and tired of the fact that they're just stuck there, and maybe they're just coming to you for emotional support, right? It's a bit hard to see the full context of this question, but it's okay for you to get clear on what it is that you want and how you want to be treated here and place boundaries. That's different to control. I also would say, well, what's the point of cutting contact? Really feel into that. It's okay honestly, if you really want to do that, it's up to you, but I don't, yeah, personally. Okay. Whew. Some of these are quite deep. Don't know if it's appropriate for like a live Q&A, but anyway, I'll do my best. We'll do a couple more. As I feel I'm like a choo-choo train running a little bit out of steam, maybe. Stephanie asked, I heard a narcissism specialist say that the twin flame journey and stages were exactly the same of a narcissistic relationship connection. I'm confused. Aren't not the exact opposite? Huh. Well, I didn't hear that. I do have a video where I kind of talk about, discuss the stages or twin flame journey and so on. And so sometimes you might think that, like, I personally don't think that there's one set of stages that applies to everyone's journey. So maybe, um, you know, I do also think, though, that we do have to be careful in how we look at twin flame relationships and soulmate relationships, because, of course, you can look at that and go, well, this is a narcissistic relationship. But I do also think that narcissism and toxicity and these labels are thrown about very liberally. And we do also have to look at that take it with a pinch of salt, I would say. And because I don't know this particular specialist or know exactly what they were saying, all I'm saying is it's very easy to call someone a narcissist if they're doing something that upsets us. Not saying that that doesn't mean that there could be narcissism there. I'm just saying it's very liberally applied. I don't personally think that the twin flame journey is anything like a narcissistic journey or anything like a narcissistic relationship. That's personally my view on it. But anyway. And it's also like coming back to the fact of what the core of the journey is. You decide also. For me, it's a journey of unconditional love. It's a journey of learning to trust myself and to stand in my truth and really to embrace my authentic self and to embody and live that. Nowhere for me does that feel anything narcissistic, but maybe because it's like I spoke about being my authentic self. Anyway, probably not. MP asked, any advice for dealing with anger toward one's twin? He recently started seeing someone else, and I've never been angry at him like this. I'm not sure how to process it since we're normally so loving. Well, for something like that, I think it's really important to just embrace those feelings and whatever's coming up there. Just be honest. Okay, I'm angry, but what are you angry about? And really just sit with those feelings. All of the anger, all of the resentment, the bitterness, the sadness, the betrayal. Sit with those feelings, but not in order to kind of, expand them or have a pity party, but in order to move through them, to release them, to transmute them to love. So in order to do that, if you're setting that intention, I choose to resolve this because I don't want to remain angry at them. That feels very uncomfortable. I think it's also important in this situation. It's okay that this is how you feel, but know that, well, as you get to the root of that, as you look at that, as you find love there, as you move through that, you will see, well, what is the lesson here really? Because we're not entitled to anyone's love, including our twin flames love. And so there is a lesson here. Okay, I think I think I got to the bottom of the chat questions, but um, okay. I'm not sure if I'm going to get through all of these questions. Apparently, more showed up. I'm going to have to be realistic in what I'm able to do here today. And I always kind of overshoot in what I think, what I'd like to get done. So I have to also, maybe some of these can be turned into videos on my channel. So it's not all lost. So, okay, well, Priya asked a great question. This whole twin flame thing is scary to be in. How do I get courage? Well, courage comes from within when you decide and you embrace that. So I would encourage you to realize that you do have not only the capacity, it's not a potential thing. It's not something that you have to go looking for. It's something that you can tune in into and decide. And something, Priya, that could help is also tuning into, maybe you can do some solar plexus like chakra meditations, because that's the seat of your personal power. Learning to stand in your truth, learning to take self-responsibility, learning how to take back your power from the things that you're scared of. Like it, for example, like, oh yeah, it's a silly example, but I was nervous about being here today, and I could be like, well, I'm scared or I'm nervous, I'm not going to do it. But, or I can say, look, I am scared and I'm nervous, but I choose to be honest about that and I choose to do that anyway. And that's how you build and grow courage, is you say, well, I embrace that. I embrace the not embrace the fear, but embrace myself in facing that fear. And I choose to have the courage to face that. I hope that helps. Okay, we'll try do a couple more questions and then we'll round it out for today. So speak up more about how TF's twin flames meet and don't know they are each other's twin flames until they separate and then one of them realizes. In that case, we are now in separation. Should one contact the other? Well, I mean, with these kinds of things, like, should I contact them? Should I not? I encourage you to tune into your own inner knowing. But as for I need to let my twin flame know we're twin flames, generally speaking, this is very general advice. It's not gonna, because that's you trying to tell them, look, you're supposed to be with me. If we translate the subtext, that doesn't go down very well. You can absolutely love them, but you can allow them also to come into their own inner knowing. And if you ask for that opening, if you, in your heart, like, you invite that opening for you to share what you know, to share your experience with them, that opening will be there. It's an invitation that the universe also conspires in your favor to help you with, and will allow that opening to come. But this kind of feels a little bit pushy, like I'm going to tell them what I know to be true and they're supposed to be with me. That's not how it goes. I've never seen that work. I could be wrong. So, stories are welcome when you can say, like, that actually works. But generally speaking, I don't recommend that. Okay, so I think we'll do like one or two more and then we'll call it a day. Hi, what are 5D communications? DM's energy they talk about. How to distinguish your own thoughts and messages from the DM. How to trust intuitions, being logical person, how it's different from daydreaming. Okay, I'm thinking this will be the last question because it's quite a big one. It's quite a roughy. Sometimes I should read ahead, I think. Okay, so how to distinguish your own thoughts and messages from the DM. Well, I mean, you do learn that discernment, and like, you are your own individual person, but also remember you're one. And so some of this communication, it's like resonating with you in your core, because it's speaking to you in a way that only your counterpart can communicate to you in that way. This is what I feel. It's a divine communication. So for me, 5D communication, not that other, like, real life communication isn't divine. It is, if you choose to see it that way too. It's just, like, I would say nonverbal, or I guess what some would say telepathic. And I do think as you learn to discover yourself, as you learn to know the voice of love in your heart, you're inviting to know the voice of your twin flame and to know their higher self in your heart, you will begin to recognize that. That is a divine thing that you begin to recognize. So, how it's different from daydreaming. In some ways it's not, but daydreaming, I think some people will judge it and be like, well, it's you just escaping. And maybe it is if you're seeing it and or using it for that. But sometimes daydreaming, visualization, it's a very powerful technique. It's a very powerful way to actually manifest what you desire. And it doesn't mean it's wrong. Just because you're like, well, I'm daydreaming, doesn't mean it's not something that in some sense is real. It's real to you. It's what you're experiencing. But of course, some people might say, well, what if I'm delusional? I think that's really the question. And I do have a little a video on that, and which kind of talks about that a bit more. So I think that is probably a good place for us to stop. So thank you for everyone. I know I'm really sorry if I didn't get to all your questions. I do still have some of them, access to them, and so maybe I start making a video about that soon. So do be sure to hit subscribe if you haven't, so then you might be able to see a whole video for your questions, so you didn't maybe miss out here today. And I'm sorry if I did not get to all your questions. Well, I can't really be sorry about that. But anyway, I did my best, and I do appreciate all of you for being here. This was the first time I did it. I might do it again, but thank you, everyone. I hope to see you soon around the interwebs. Take care. Bye.